It is 8:30 p.m. and it is Monday, May 20th, 2019. And welcome to week 3 of Drugs and Crime. And recognize the fact that at the end of this week, we will be crossing over into the second half. Be aware that after this week, I will not be accepting assignments from weeks 1, 2, or 3 that have not been previously submitted, excluding discussion posts, which you already know can't be submitted unless they are submitted during the course of the week of the discussion forum. But if you do submit weeks 1, 2, or 3, they must be submitted by this week, or else they cannot be submitted. And you will still lose points unless you have previously reached out to me to let me know reasons. If you're just reaching out to me, I really can't help you. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started with the assignments. I've already had a couple questions about them, so I'm going to explain those answers during the course of this next hour or less. So let's go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And all this instructor information, additional course information, I'm not going over again. You are aware of that, except you should be aware. Again, there's a video for critical thinking that you can find, and you can copy and paste this in your browser. Each written assignment or course project has a rubric, and it's located in each weekly assignment. We're going to discuss that. And then there's a general discussion rubric that we use. You can see we're at week 3, and lectures take place 8:30 to 9:30. You must attend the live lecture or listen to the archive. There's a keyword or phrase given. You're required to provide that for the to let me know that you have not only attended, but that you've paid attention to the lecture as well. At the bottom, you see the recordings from week 1, week 2, and after I complete this at week 3, then I also email them to you as well. So let's go right ahead and look at the week 3 announcement. Open it up. So this week, we're going to talk about policy and social trends, mental health, and criminal behavior. Will be presented, and to prepare for this, you had to read chapters 3 and 4 of your textbook. I previously sent you the PowerPoints that you should have for them as well. And then take a look at the activities, policy, and social trends, drug use, abuse, addiction, theories of addiction, and drug identification activity. And then your discussion assignment that is due tomorrow night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, social policies and trends. I'm not going to talk about in detail discussion posts. You know where I'm looking at this particular point. I have graded discussion posts 1 and 2 already. So you know what I'm looking for, and you know when you fell short. So your initial post is due Tuesdays, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and the reply post due Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Finally, be sure to complete the course project, Heroin and Crime, and then the quiz. And these two are due by Sunday, the 20. I think it's the 27th or the 23rd. No, Sunday the 26th. Due by Sunday the 26th. I know that's a Memorial Day weekend, but you still have to get those assignments in. Okay, and then next Monday, it is Labor Day. I mean, it is Memorial Day. However, I will still be doing a lecture next Monday night, even though it's a holiday. I will still be doing the lecture Monday night at 8:30 to 9:30. So continue to be strong and finish strong. And you know about my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. Okay. Let's take a look at the course calendar. Excuse me. Still battling this bug. Here's where we are today. The reading assignment, as I said, you can click on that and you'll see the same information there. Your live lecture, it tells you where the link is and so forth. Then your initial post, due Tuesday. Reply post, due Saturday. And then your 2 written assignments are due on the 26th, which is Sunday. And you'll see there are 3 check marks. One of the check marks stands for the key phrase or word that's due. And if you don't get it in on time for that day, each day it decreases in terms of points. So it's 5 for getting it on time for the 26th or before, 4 here, then 3 here, then 2 here, then 1 here. And if you get it by Friday, no points. No points at all. Okay, then be aware that next week there will be a live lecture, even though it is Memorial Day. All right, I don't take off because the fact that I want to make sure that each of you get the details that you need for the assignment. All right, so all right, let's go to the module itself. And the topic, again, I gave you, policy and social trends, mental health, and criminal behavior. So let's take a look at the assignments. Okay, again, here's the course project. And someone has asked me already, they said, for this course project, conduct research regarding theories, explain the connection between substance abuse and criminal behavior. And they asked, you know, I thought it was about heroin and crime. Well, heroin is substance abuse. And there is criminal behavior other than just using the drugs, but there are things that people do. And there's some examples given, such as human trafficking, burglaries, robberies, gang-related crimes, and so forth. And we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But this assignment is telling you to make sure you utilize this fact pattern. And there's no contradiction in this. It's just the same context of what is involved here. After conducting the research, a minimum of 3 pages. That does not count the cover page. That does not count the reference page. Should be double space, people, not single space. And going down, must include at least 3 credible, reliable sources that you discover other than your textbook. So don't rely on or cite Wikipedia. We've already said that over and over. It's also in the rubric, which I'll show you in a minute. Proper citations in the body of the paper, the cover page, and reference page are all required for all of these written assignments, all right? And then if you need some help, you know, you can go to the Drugs and Crime Course Guide, and then click on the Module 3 tab. It'll give you some more details on it. That is, I'll show it, well, you saw it already, but I'll show it to you. But now let's take a look at the rubric itself. Okay, again, it tells you the due date, which is Sunday. It tells you possible 40 points. Look at the rubric and think in terms of what the content of the written assignment is. As a whole, content paper is relevant and fully addresses the topics or questions in the assignment. And analyzes the theories explaining the connection between substance abuse and criminal behavior, because there is a correlation and the relationship between heroin use and criminal behavior. Remember, substance abuse, heroin is an example of what we're talking about as substance abuse. And the criminal behavior is the activities that take place as a result of the presence or the use of heroin. And then there's some examples given between drug use, including abuse, prescription, painkillers, how you actually get to the point of heroin, and crime at user level. And these are some of the crimes: human trafficking, burglary, robbery, gang-related activities. There are other things too. There's credit card abuse, identity theft, all of those. So education and prevention programs at the local level aimed at reducing heroin use and responding to heroin overdoses. So you're going to write about that. You're going to research about that, a minimum of 3 pages, minimum of 3 pages. And then, of course, 3 credible resources. You can go with more, but a minimum of 3. Remember this: your citations, don't throw them in. I can tell when some people have done it. But you need to make sure that the citations support the statements that you make in your paper. You also need to have them throughout the body of the paper, because I can tell when you write something that you got it from somewhere else, because it goes to either statistics or some information relating to the issue that you researched. And then make sure that your reference page also matches the citations in the body. Now, if you use a citation more than once, there don't need to be more than one reference to the same item. It's just telling the source that you got the information that you cite in the body of the paper. That is where the reference page comes in. And it should be properly done using APA format. We have the tools that we've discussed with you for how to do that properly. And I grade very seriously on those kinds of things. Make sure that you follow the rubric. And then, again, beating a dead horse, which I have to, APA format, the title page and reference page, proper spacing and paragraph, all of these things apply. Then it tells you things that we tell you: don't use Wikipedia. Now, I will say this to you: when your content of your paper, you can lose many points or all of the points if you don't provide content. You got to make sure that you don't give me 2 pages. If you do, you're going to lose points for that. If you give me 2.5 pages, you're going to lose points for that. You could go 3 or more pages. I don't mind. I read them, and I read them very fast. And I know what I'm looking for, and I take the time to share with you. Some people, again, I repeat, get caught up on, saying they don't understand if it's heroin, what the relationship is between drug use and criminal behavior. There is a correlation between drug use and criminal behavior. You'll hear me say that a million times in this course, starting with week 1. And then let's go to the next assignment. Your discussion posts. You're going to write about the war on drugs and the issues with the war on drugs, which I'll be talking about that a little bit tonight, and the strategies that are used in your initial post and reply post. Remember, I said I appreciate it when students reply to more than one post, because it makes the discussion forum more interesting. And don't give me one-liners or little short answers. No, I want to see that you actually putting forth some effort and being able to demonstrate that you have actually taken the time to research. It says be sure to include proper citations to the source you relied upon for the information. I appreciate that, but I don't require, but it's important for that to be a habit. that we keep stressing to students, and we pointed that out, if you recall, from week 1 when we provided you with the academic integrity video that you had a chance to see. And if you haven't, go back and look in the resources tab. It's right there, and you take some time and go through that, and you'll find it. You'll find it. All right. And then there's the quiz. It's a time quiz. Make sure that you have studied before you take it. Utilize the resources that I provided to you in terms of the lecture, as well as the resources that you discovered from your research, as well as the textbook, as well as using the PowerPoints as a review source to help you prepare for this. Remember, you agree to abide by the academic misconduct policy that we went over in the course syllabus, and it could result in a person being not only expelled from the course, but from the school. I've had already at least one student that this happened to, and I've been getting messages from the deans for us to watch out for this more, and we can tell. For example, if a person has all the questions, and you know, it's set for 30 minutes, and you only do 2 questions, that means that you probably were looking for the information. And, you know, so you don't want to find yourself caught in an academic integrity issue or a possible violation. And then your classroom lecture, you know, the point that we give you to get your points. Usually it's at the end, but sometimes I say it throughout the lecture, and then when you get to the end, I will formally reveal it to you, so you'll have it then. And those are the assignments for week 3. Again, read very carefully and understand what the topic is all about. It's about heroin and crime. And there is a relationship, and we're going to talk about that in about a minute or so. So now let's go to the lesson tab. Lesson content. Oh, before we do that, I want to again remind you of the drugs and crime course guide. It helps you. Clicking on it once again tells you for each module what the assignments are. So we're in week 3, so you can look at this, and then it tells you how you can help do well, how you can deal with getting ready for tests. Student Success Guide, which is a link on the course homepage, but you can go through that test taking tab for tips that will help you improve it, and understanding the research for this course project that you do in various library resources that are credible. All right, and if you need help, tells you how to get in touch with a criminal justice tutor and tutor match to schedule an appointment. And then the all-important APA toolkit tab to help you to deal with the APA resources, the template, and then the question is there a tutoring available? Yes, the answer. And there are tutors that are available to help you in terms of that. So you have all the resources that are available here, and each week you'll see this. All right, so you can utilize that. All right, let's go back to lesson content now. So we're going to talk about the fact that drug addiction and genetics, psychology, and the sociology of what is taking place here. Mental health and self-medication that lead to substance abuse and relationship between substance abuse and criminal behavior. That's what I said earlier. I will go into that in just a few minutes. All right. So we're going to talk about these different sections right here. And then I've already covered the course project, discussion, the live lecture, and then again, it reminds you again about the drugs and crime course guide that we had. So let's get into, and let me move this up a little bit. Let me see if I can try to, let me see if I can, here we go. Slide that up. All right, so now, there have been so many different things that our government has tried to do, pass laws, all kinds of programs are developed to try to help individuals who are caught in what I call the trap of drug use, abuse, and addiction. Now, one of the things that you should be aware of is that going way back to even the 20s, when we had prohibition that related to alcohol, there have been criminal activity to try to distribute alcohol before it was legal, and now it has advanced since the I believe it was the Volstead Act that made alcohol legal and repealed the prohibition against the use of alcohol, and of course regulated as far as minors are concerned. But there's continues now to be an ongoing, as we call, legal production to regulate different drug substances and to try to help individuals to prevent or reduce criminal activity with use and abuse. Now, I'm going to say up front, and I say this, that drug use and abuse and addiction, particularly the latter of the two, abuse and addiction, though they are criminal in activity, in reality, they're health issues that individuals who utilize these drugs, they utilize them for a number of reasons, and they find themselves in these traps. And you're going to learn about that during the course of the next few weeks in this class. We're going to deal next week with how law enforcement deals with it, and I have something I'm going to share with you. I'll be sending that out to you relating to a statute that was put together here in Illinois for law enforcement to help deal with a violation and of abuse and addiction of drugs. So going back here to the history, the 80s, it talks about there's been the war on drugs, and the idea was to try to crack down on the criminal behavior and activity. So there are various federal laws and state laws that have been passed and continue to be passed, increasing sentences for drug-related crimes. But the issue has been, as it says, sentencing disparities exist for possession of powder and crack cocaine. In other words, there have been many individuals who have been incarcerated who were not at the quantity level of dealership, but for personal use, and prisons and jails have been, I mean, just overflowing with these kinds of individuals. And the laws are set up, they're mandatory sentencing, and so, as it says here in the last sentence, it has dramatically increased prison populations and strained correction resources that were already strained even more. And so individuals go ahead and use these drugs. Now, here's the problem. As I said, it's a health issue. Now, if a person, let's use an example, if a person is sick with the flu and they don't get treated properly, the flu won't go away. In fact, it may progress to pneumonia. But the point of the matter is that do we prosecute and arrest people who are sick with these with the use medicines to make them well? No, we don't. However, though, what happens, though, oftentimes is you'll discover that there are many ways that individuals innocently start out using painkillers, cold medications, and other kind of medications that progress out into abuse of them, and then ultimately you're addicted. And when you're addicted to something, that means it controls you. And so the war on drugs, wasn't really working very well. And I've already said this, and I've gone on record many times to say that it is my firm belief and policy based on my experiences as a criminal defense lawyer, where I represented I was in drug court, where I also was a police officer, and I was a police officer, village attorney, and prosecutor in a South suburban community in Chicago called Ford Heights, which many people labeled as a crack cocaine capital of the South suburbs, because there were many, many, many houses that cocaine was cooked and turned into crack, and it was distributed out of there, coming from other parts of the state, but that was one of the central South suburban locations. And so, when people got arrested for committing those offenses, there were houses that blew up and innocent people were killed. There were a lot of fires. But what happens is this, is very true. The war on drugs is not working very well, because as long as there is a audience or a customers, then the reality is that people, the war on drugs is going to continue, or either drug use and abuse is going to continue. It says, based on the reality that incarcerating people for drug-related crimes, it doesn't decrease recidivism. In fact, it increases recidivism, because here's what happened. A person's arrested for drugs, they go in, they don't get the adequate treatment that they need because there's economic issues, and they get maybe some start or something, help, or either I call them Band-Aid situations where people really need totally to be delivered from this drug or drugs that's driving them or has taken away their ability to maybe operate as productive individuals. And so what happens is that they go in, and by the way, while they're incarcerated, they're still able to get drugs, because they're crooked correction officers, correction guards, and there are many other ways. I'll give you an example. I represented a young man who was a correction officer years ago, and he was not at the county level, not the state level, in Cook County. And what he did was he would bring magazines to some of the people, and we found out, or it was discovered, and he was charged, and I became his attorney, with distributing drugs. I said, wait a minute, Professor Wright, you said he was bringing in magazines. Yes, you're not supposed to bring in magazines from outside and those kind of things, but what was happening, good people, is that those magazines had been soaked in PCP or some kind of liquid drug, allowed to dry, pressed out, and then brought in. And you know what they would do? They wouldn't read the magazines inside. They would chew the pages, and consequently, there would be drugs. So those are just some of the things. But there are many, many, many more. I can go on and on and on. But the bottom line is that, so individuals who are incarcerated with drug problems can be educated. They can serve a whole lot of time, or they can serve a short amount of time. When they come out, they're going to go right back and turn into what they were before they went in. And so the point of the matter is that the only way it's going to change is if we are able to get the correct amount of drug treatment for these individuals. It's cheaper to educate than to incarcerate, but it is also cheaper to deal with the health of individuals and get individuals cured in a healthy country than to keep incarcerating these people over and over and over and over again. Only ones who benefit from that are the individuals who work in the criminal justice system, who keep jobs because they are provided with the resources of individuals who keep committing crime, who get arrested, they get out, they get arrested, they get out, they get arrested, and ultimately sometimes they even end up killing someone or themselves. Such as a young man that I represented some years ago who was guilty of several burglaries, and he was addicted to drugs. I believe at that time it might have been cocaine or heroin, but anyway, the bottom line was he had a drug problem, and he would go to jail, come out, go right back to it. Well, the last time this occurred, I became his lawyer, and I generally tell the families to post bail to get individuals out so that they can not be incarcerated while they're waiting trial. I took a position this time differently with this individual, and it's more than one, but this one particular one I'm going to tell you about, and I recommended to his family that they leave him in. I said because if he's out, he's going to need to be almost chained to the bed or someplace in the house, which is not humane and probably not allowed, or else he was going to get out of the house, attempt to commit a burglary or robbery or theft, and it's not going to be good for him and maybe some other people. And so ultimately, what this individual did, they bailed him out contrary to my advice, and when they bailed him out, shortly after that, this young man left the house and attempted to cross over a dangerous highway, an expressway or highway, a super highway. And he was able to cross over there and get to the other side of town on the other side of the highway. And while he was over there, he was engaged in a burglary. And the police were called, and then a chase ensued, a foot chase, where the young man, trying to get away from the police officers, tried to backtrack and run back over the fence, run back across the highway, but he didn't make it because he was hit by trucks and multiple cars, and he was killed suddenly on that expressway. So what was the result of his death? The result of his death was substance abuse, drug addiction, and an attempt to commit a crime. And what was the crime? Supporting his habit, buying the drugs with the things that he could steal during a burglary. So that's an example of what we are talking about. And there are many, many, many more in my career since 78 to 2000. And even before that, when I worked with lawyers while I was still in law school and even in college, I saw so many situations where there were people who were committing crimes. So my patented statement is there is a correlation between increased crime and substance abuse, because substance abuse leads to crime to support the habit of the substance abuse that the person is operating under, or the addiction that they're operating under. Very, very, very clear, very simple concept. And heroin is one of the issues, and you're going to learn in this course, in the weeks with videos that we have, that you will see how problematic it is. In fact, next week, I believe that's one of our first videos that come up. There's going to be some that'll bring tears to your eyes that you'll never forget. And I certainly understand substance abuse, too, in terms of what it can do to a family. My baby sister 1994, one of the hardest things I had to do as a minister before I became a pastor was to eulogize my baby sister. She overdosed on cocaine, and she had a aneurysm, a brain aneurysm that was brought on, and we lost her because of that. And you know, she was out doing some things that she shouldn't have done to support the habit. She never was really arrested, but she ended up passing away because of that. So it is a problem. So it says here is the thought that people who use or abuse or are addicted to drugs also engage in certain drug-related activities. That is absolutely true. In addition, there may be underlying reasons, and I'm reading this right here, why a person uses or abuses drugs and then engages in criminal behavior. I already explained that. And we need to be able to identify the reasons why a person abuses drugs, and I've given you some tips on that. And we need to be able to do something to reduce them, and I've given you some tips on that as well. And you can find more details in your studies. Now, let's talk about some of the models here that are used to deal with drug use, abuse, and addiction. There is what we call the choice, the disease, and the self-medication model. So the choice is the first one. The choice model is a theory that believes that a person chooses to use a substance and therefore can simply choose to stop using it. False, false, false. Again, they cannot, once they start using it, easily kick the habit. Many of you who've been cigarette smokers and stopped being cigarette smokers understand what I'm talking about. But when a person, and then listen to me, it says there's a belief that person choose. Most of the people that I know who become addicts and abusers, they had other issues that they were not able to overcome that led into that. For example, my baby sister. You guys recall the story that I shared about my life when my mom was killed in 1963. Well, that same child that I was talking about a few minutes ago never knew her mother because she was born in 62 and she was very little. And when my mother was killed, she never recovered from that because even though she had other family members who raised her, but there's nothing like that mother. And so it was a battle that she lost finally when the drugs took her life. And so it wasn't her choice to do that. People started to use drugs for a number of reasons. For example, individuals can start out, and this is why I don't like painkillers, and you're going to discover this in the weeks to come, but I'm introducing you to it now, that painkillers can be an initiation into abuse, use, and addiction of other drugs, such as heroin and other kinds of chemicals, synthetic drugs, and so forth. Because when people are in pain, for example, it is easy to get addicted to painkillers. There are many, many individuals that we probably have all known or come into contact with who innocently went to the doctor and got some painkillers, and they started taking these things. I'm not a big fan of them. I have actually gone through pain because I've seen in my life entertainers that I've known, athletes, and individuals that were not of any of those two categories find themselves just reaching a point that their bodies, after a while, start saying, you need this to live. And so what they did was they started taking more and more painkillers, and that wasn't satisfactory. They would start to get prescriptions from doctors, and the painkillers became like candy. And what they were doing, they were on that road to where we find heroin and other drugs. Once again, you will see in the weeks to come what I am talking about. So the point of the matter is that individuals, it says the choice model is that people choose and can so be able to stop it. I already explained that. I don't know too many people who choose to get pneumonia, and then they try to do the things to stop it. But like for example, I got this shot that they gave me called pneumonia shot. I don't take the flu shot personally, because the last time I got the flu, I had taken the flu shot, and that's a long time ago, probably before some of you guys were born, but I haven't had the flu since that time, even with all of these warnings and all of those going out, because they shoot the drug into your body, the disease into your body, and then antibodies fight it off. Well, unfortunately, there have been too many people whose antibodies, it turned on them, and they ran. So here's what I'm saying, is that the same thing happens when people find themselves taking medications. They get a cough syrup. I had a young man that I knew years ago, and this young man used to work in the mailroom. When I worked in the mailroom, this is back like 69 or 70, and this young man, his name was Marvin, and Marvin was commonly known as the syrup man. And what Marvin would do is Marvin would drink Vicks or some kind of cough syrup or something, and he got to the point that he used to carry it around his pocket, and he would just drink it. And and his language would start slurring, and then finally what ended up happening is that he had a heart attack, and then he died. We had another young man who was a librarian at the law firm, which led to me becoming the law librarian. He drank a lot of alcohol, but we found out that he was mixing not painkillers, but cough medicine or cough syrup, some extremely strong stuff, and they found him dead on the streets, had a heart attack. So I'm saying those are some of the things that happen. So I'm not a fan of the choice model. I think that it is not it's not very real. Let's talk about next the self-medication model. Now, the self-medication model, the name describes what it is, means that you're medicating yourself. Use legal and illegal substances to compensate for problems that have not been properly treated, such as anxiety, depression, or mental illness diagnosis. And so that's what I started talking about when we start saying that you'll start with a legal drug like the things I was talking about earlier, even as simple as a painkiller. You might even get into the point of taking different amphetamines. And anyway, the point of the matter is that you start to mix them with alcohol, or you mix them with other things like these synthetic drugs, and you find yourself trying to, as they say, hide anxiety. You get high to try to escape. Let me tell you about cocaine. And I learned this when I was as a police officer in the academy, and I never forgot this, what they said. They said, the first time you use cocaine, you reach a level of something that you might not ever have lived unless you were using some other kind of drug. But many people, that's the first time they really went on a high. I'm not talking about alcohol drinking high. I'm talking about on a trip high. And then after that, then you start to do what we call chasing that high. We'll see a movie called Chasing the Dragon, and we'll be talking about that later in this course, where you are trying to achieve that high. And what you do is, in order to get that, you say, "Ooh, I want to go higher," and you increase the dose. Then you get these drugs that are on the street and people are selling, and they're not pure is bad, but they cut it with all kinds of stuff. I mean, things that we talked about in week 1 and in week 2 that will paint thinner, or they put all kinds of stuff in there, even as you know, drain cleaner and stuff like that in there. And then here you are taking this into your body, and so you are so out of it that your anxiety is suppressed, the depression, but you're going deeper and deeper, and your quality of life is decreasing. By the way, when you get hooked on drugs, one of the things that you will do is you will commit theft from anybody, anywhere, anytime, anyway. Not because you want to hurt anybody, but because your body is causing you to crave for these things, and you will do whatever it takes to get them. That's such as what that young man did, and many other individuals. They're not in control of their bodies or their minds or even many of their actions. And so to deal with depression and other mental illness diagnosis, let me tell you something, good people. Drug use, especially the kind of drugs that we'll be talking about in the next few weeks, enhance mental illness diagnosis. It makes it so that the individual is out of control already, but it's worse, and they become dangerous not only to themselves but to others. They will even hurt their own children. It's an epidemic, and we're going to be again covering that. And so let's go to the disease model. The disease model is when people, let me, before I make sure I get clear on the self-medication, to sum it up, basically what is being said here is that the people start out innocently trying to get help for their problems, but they reach the stage where they start to progress into illegal drug use, and they find themselves increasing the drugs, and there results in mental health disorders. Drugs do create mental health disorders, and that's what I wanted to say about it. But that's themselves doing this, okay? They can get phony prescriptions. There are even individuals who have stolen medical prescription pads from their doctor's offices, and they'd write the prescriptions and stuff like that, and then they'd go get them. Also, you should know one more thing I will say about this, and we kind of talked about this, I think, in week 2, is that individuals now, you go into drugstores, there are certain things that used to be that you can go in the aisle and buy, but now you have to go over the counter, and you actually have to sign, because we recognize that there are certain ingredients in some of these innocent things that people utilize to make all kinds of drugs and to stretch the drugs, and result in some very serious mental problems for individuals who ingest these things. Then finally, there's a disease model of addiction based on the idea that as a result of chemical or biological issue. The theory is that punishing people for drug-related crimes without addressing the underlying reasons for drug use or addiction will not likely end the pattern of criminal behavior. I say amen. That is exactly what I've been talking about in my whole lecture, and pretty much where I stand based on my professional experiences and personal experiences, as well as a pastor and a minister. I've had to deal with this with individuals as well. And so the underlying reasons that I've shared for drug use or addiction are not going to change, and criminal behavior will continue to operate unless there is some actual substance abuse, as we say, grandma would say, show enough down, real to earth treatment for these individuals. And a lot of it has to be, they have to stay in the facility, and it's really tough trying to go through the issue of getting away from the use of those drugs. There is a, give me a second, let me reach over. I got it by my desk here. There is a book that I have. Here it is right here. A young man who came to visit the college campus in Romeoville by the name of Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan was an addict, and he wrote a book based on his experiences called From Dope to Hope, A Man in Recovery, Tim Ryan. And you can go and find this book. It's available on Amazon. And he came and spoke to us at the Romeoville campus, and he shared some experiences about what he went through with addiction and how he innocently found himself in this situation. He said, as I'm reading the back of his cover, he says, by his own account, he said he shouldn't be here. He states, where there is life, there is hope. Known as the Hope Dealer, Tim is a successful entrepreneur, grateful recovering heroin addict and alcoholic. And he went through all of this. Let me tell you, one of the things that he shares in his book and he shared with us is that he was helping other individuals. But one of the people that he could not help, and he talked about this in detail, was his own son, who he saw. This gentleman is right here in our Joliet area. And if you want more details on this book, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. I had talked to the school about possibly getting it in the library, but haven't been able to do that. But From Dope to Hope. But anyway, he talks about something that he did to overcome and try to help others. And so, anyway, back to the point here with the disease model, the theory of punishing people will continue until we address the issue. As a result, many public health advocates, medical professionals advocate that treatment should be a part of any sentence, and that is an absolute necessity. That's why I said it is a public health issue that is of an epidemic proportions. Now it's hit the heroin stage, and it's hitting people. Some people didn't care about it as long as it was in the urban areas, but now it's in the suburban areas, and it's hitting people from, by the way, it doesn't matter what culture you're from, how rich you are, how poor you are. It's just a question of what kind of drugs you're going to use. And you'll see that as we go through some of the videos. But we're going to deal with treatment and rehabilitation in the last week. But we're going to deal with some other issues. And then here's an article on substance abuse and mental abuse challenges for intervention that you can also take a look at as well. So you have an idea about what we're talking about. And then the theories of addiction and drug identification activity, I'm not going to go through these, but there are different theories that are here, such as theory that drug abusers can stop or control their use but choose not to. I've already talked about them, so you have to have paid attention to what I have talked about so far. I named 3 of them, and then you provide those answers. And so you'd answer that, and then you'd go to the next question. They won't let me go back. Theory that drug abusers can stop or control their use but choose not to. Anyway, I'm not going to put the answers in. You can do that yourself, and then you can go on from there. Okay, that is our topic for today, dealing with the issues. I've covered all of the points that I said, theories of drug addiction and abuse based on the biology, genetics, and psychology and sociology, the connection between mental health and self-medication, the relationship between substance abuse and criminal behavior. We spent a lot of time in that. And then the policies and social trends connected with drugs, mental health, crime, and the criminal justice system. Good people, the criminal justice system will continue to overflow because of drugs. I remember as a young man growing up with the gangs, and the gangs were not as violent as they are now. And what brought gang activity to the most violent level has to do with individuals who found themselves dealing in situations where they were selling or distributing drugs. There, in my, I think it's in the other course that I teach. I think Introduction to Criminal Law. I think we talked about the Freakonomics, and I don't think that was in this course. Let's see. I don't think that was last week. Let me just take a look, because let's see. I'll tell you in a second. But I think it's in and many of you. Oh yeah, it was last week. Yeah, you remember the Freakonomics of crack dealing? This video that I shared with you. You remember that? You guys remember that? Yeah. Well, what you learn there is what I'm about to say, is that when drugs entered into the hands of gangs, and particularly with this crack cocaine thing, violence came about to protect the territory. And you heard them talk about that in that Freakonomics video. And that's one of the things that has created an ongoing problem in terms of our fight and the war on drugs, is that the only way, as I summarize this and simply say, hey guys, the way that we're going to beat this thing is to get people. I use the term deliverance. That's a term that we use in church, but it fits. It fits. It definitely fits. And when we say deliverance, it's a spiritual term, but it's also a medical term. Deliverance means remove you from. It means set you free. And that's what is needed in order to help individuals to recover. I knew a gentleman who was, yep, amen is right. I feel you on that one. That is something that is to my heart, dear to me, based on, I told you, my first personal situation, but what I've seen many, many years, individuals I have encountered on a regular basis. Yeah. But what I was getting ready to say is that when you find that people understand that it's a systematic thing, and here's what the judge used to say, who was a criminal defense lawyer, who was my mentor. His name was R. Eugene Pincham. Judge Pincham used to say that if the system wanted to decrease crime, they would educate instead of incarcerate, which is what we worked on in a program called Probation Challenge. But today, even more so than not just educate, but also receive treatment so that people are delivered and cured of this illness called substance abuse. If that happened, there are many people who are in the criminal justice system working, including law enforcement, including probation officers, parole officers, court reporters, judges, defense prosecutors, and other individuals would have to find themselves possibly learning how to do other things too. Or as somebody said, it's counterproductive financially, because as long as there are systems like that, then they're going to operate. I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. When I started practicing law in 1978, some of the same people that I represented as criminal defense lawyers, before I retired, I represented some of their children and some of their nephews, some of their nieces, some of their cousins who were younger, and they had learned this way of life coming up. And if we systematically begin to cut into those types of things, then recidivism will decrease. and that's sad, but that's the way it is, and really what we face. Well, it's about 9:30, and the thing that I need to do with you guys now is to give you something that I want to leave with you as far as a key phrase, and that is very simple: drug abuse. That's it. That's it. My keywords aren't really that difficult because my thing is to tie the keywords to what we talked about, drug abuse. So I'm going to say good night to you guys, and I am going to say hope to see you guys next week. Please be sure that you listen to the entire, thank you, to the entire video if you came in earlier, because there are some things I said about assignments, but make sure that you follow the rubric and the module very, very carefully. 3 pages means 3 pages, not 1 paragraph, not a half a page. You will get zapped. And my goal is not to zap you. My goal is to provide you with, as I said from the very beginning, and many of you know me because you've had me in other classes, I've been the same. I am, as one student said to me one time, Professor Wright, one thing about you I learned is that you're very predictable. I said, well, that's good, because I require excellence. I want to produce, as I said already, ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice professionals. And that's how I roll. I can't speak for other professors, but that's Professor Wright, Richard Wright, Dr. Wright, hey you, whatever. All right. So good night to you guys. I'll say enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. But remember, work goes on. And next Monday, by the way, like I said, it is the 27th. And people say, hey man, it's a holiday. We're going to have. I said the only holiday that holidays I don't do lectures, which generally doesn't happen, is Thanksgiving or Christmas and New Year's. Well, we don't have New Year's anyway because we're really not in school during that time. So, all right, good night, guys. Have a good week.